Have you, or maybe someone you know, ever stopped taking hormonal birth control and just felt like your body went completely haywire? It's a really common thing, and honestly, it can be super confusing. So today, we're going to get to the bottom of what is actually going on. All right, let's just dive right in.
Okay, so this might sound familiar. Picture this. Someone's been on the pill for, say, a decade. They feel fine, everything's regular, but they decide to stop. Maybe they're thinking about starting a family. And at first, everything seems okay. But then, their periods start getting more and more irregular. Acne starts popping up out of nowhere, and they notice some weight gain that they just can't explain. So what do? They go online and they stumble upon this term, post-birth control syndrome, and it seems to fit perfectly, right?
But here's the question that really changes everything. What if the pill isn't the bad guy in this story? What if the problem isn't something the pill did to your body, but something it was hiding this whole time? What if birth control wasn't the cause, but was actually the cover-up?
So let's start by just looking at the symptoms themselves, because when you stop the pill and things start to feel, well, just off, it can be really upsetting, especially when you're trying to figure out what your body is trying to tell you.
The symptoms that send people down that internet rabbit hole are pretty consistent. We're talking about periods that are all over the place, or maybe they just disappear entirely. Acne that feels worse than it did when you were a teenager. Weight gain that just doesn't make sense with your diet or exercise habits, and, of course, some pretty significant mood swings. It's a really frustrating mix of things that can make you feel like your body is totally betraying you.
Now here's where things get really interesting. This collection of symptoms, it's not some new mysterious syndrome that's caused by stopping birth control. More often than not, it's actually the re-emergence of an underlying issue that was probably there all along.
You know, a good way to think about the birth control pill is like this. It's a fantastic band-aid. It gives your body this steady, even dose of artificial estrogen and progesterone, and that essentially overrides your body's natural cycle. Now, that's amazing for preventing pregnancy, but it also has the side effect of smoothing over the symptoms of any hormonal imbalances you might have had before you started. So once you take that band-aid off, the original problem is, well, it's right there again.
And you know what? Very, very often, that underlying issue is something called Polycystic Ovary Syndrome, or PCOS. It is an extremely common hormonal disorder. The pill is great at regulating periods and helping with acne. It basically masks the classic signs of PCOS. So it makes perfect sense that when you stop taking it, your body goes back to its natural state and those PCOS symptoms come roaring back.
So here's a really crucial point. The hormones in the pill are very short-acting. I mean, that's why you can get pregnant if you miss just one pill, right? They don't hang around in your system for months or years. And what that means is that all those expensive hormone detoxes or juice cleanses you see all over social media, they're completely unnecessary. They aren't getting to the real root of the problem, because the pill itself isn't the problem.
So if the culprit is likely PCOS, what does that actually mean for your body? Let's get into the science of it, because it's really all about a miscommunication between your brain and your ovaries. It's actually a pretty fascinating feedback loop when you break it down.
Okay, let's walk through this step by step. In a person with PCOS, their ovaries tend to have a lot of small, immature egg follicles. Now, each one of these follicles produces just a tiny bit of estrogen, but when you add them all up, the baseline estrogen level in the body is higher than it should be. The brain sees this high estrogen level and gets confused. It thinks, oh, looks like an egg is already developing nicely. So instead of sending a big, strong go signal, that's a hormone called FSH, by the way, follicle-stimulating hormone, it kind of just whispers. It sends a really weak signal. And that weak signal, it just isn't powerful enough to get one of those follicles to fully mature and release an egg. The whole system just stalls out before it can complete the cycle. And this is a perfect example of how interconnected everything in our body is. For people who might be carrying some extra weight, this whole effect can get magnified because fat cells also produce their own estrogen. This just adds to that already high baseline level, confusing the brain even more and making it that much harder for the body to ovulate regularly.
But here is the really good news. Once we understand this communication breakdown, we can actually fix it. Modern medicine has some really clever ways to essentially reboot the system and get that clear line of communication between the brain and ovaries working again.
So how do we fix this communication gap? Well, there are two main medications that are often used to help with ovulation in PCOS, letrozole and Clomid. Letrozole, which you might also hear called Femara, is now the preferred first-line treatment. It works by directly lowering the amount of estrogen floating around in your blood. Clomid is an older drug, but it's still super useful. It works a little differently. It blocks the estrogen receptors in your brain. And while they both have the same goal, getting you to ovulate, studies that compared them head-to-head have shown that for people with PCOS, letrozole actually leads to higher live birth rates.
What's so cool about this is that both of these medications are basically trying to trick the brain. They just do it in different ways. Whether you're actually lowering the estrogen in the blood with letrozole or just making the brain think estrogen is low with Clomid, the end result is exactly the same. The brain senses this low estrogen state and it kind of panics. It responds by shouting, sending out a much stronger surge of that FSH hormone we talked about. And that powerful signal is finally strong enough to kickstart ovulation. It's just a really brilliant way to correct that miscommunication.
Now, beyond just stimulating ovulation directly, there are other really important supportive treatments to talk about. See, for a lot of people with PCOS, a huge piece of the puzzle is something called insulin resistance. This basically just means your body's cells aren't responding to insulin, the hormone that manages blood sugar, as well as they should. So medications like metformin and even some over-the-counter supplements like inositols work by helping your cells use insulin more effectively. This can lower inflammation, help regulate hormones, and sometimes it can even be enough to restore ovulation all on its own.
So the path from feeling totally confused and frustrated to feeling clear and in control, it really starts with understanding what's truly going on inside your own body. It's all about taking charge of your own health journey. Ultimately, if anything we've talked about today sounds familiar, the answer isn't going to be found in a blog post about some vaguely defined syndrome. The real answer lies in getting a proper medical diagnosis from a healthcare professional who can help you understand your own unique hormonal landscape.
And this is the key takeaway, the main thing I really want you to remember from all this. For so many people, the problem is not a side effect of birth control. It is not something the pill did to you. It's about what the pill was successfully hiding. Removing that Band-Aid simply revealed the truth that was there all along.
Armed with this knowledge, the power is really in your hands now. Instead of chasing after internet myths and expensive cures that don't work, you can go out and seek the clarity that only comes from a true diagnosis. So, are you ready to stop just treating the symptoms and start addressing the real cause?